All right, welcome back to the circle. So good to have you. So, as a chef, I always want to turn everything into a recipe. So, just as a recap, the recipe for a great life is a combination of the reduction, your personal constitution, the circle, and storytelling. The reduction, which is the name of the book that my partner Steve Shaw and I wrote, it's coming out in the spring, is all about getting rid of the water in your life, if you will. Kind of like, when I'm in the kitchen making a stock, you boil it down, you get rid of all the water and the non-flavorful stuff, and you're left with this rich, delicious, intense, beautiful broth. And that's, really symbolic to me of life, right? If you get that stuff that's weighing you down out of your life and you really condense it down to the stuff that matters, not only do you save a ton of time, but you become very relaxed. That's where the anxiety lives, in that extra stuff and trying to just do more, and ending up with less. The personal constitution is kind of your internal compass to achieve that. I've talked about all these things in past podcasts, but today what I really want to focus on is storytelling. The third thing is the circle. So the reduction, your personal constitution, the circle of control, and then storytelling. Storytelling, what is it? So it should be something that actually happened in the past, right? And ideally something good, to put a smile on your face, to help someone else, just to kind of remember, wow, that was great. And then you come right back to the present. What storytelling is damaging, and it really is amazing. Most of these podcasts come from my deep love of somebody in my life. It could even be a stranger, and you see people suffering. You see people suffering unnecessarily. And that is my mission, to get rid of that suffering, because most of it is self-inflicted. So what a storytelling shouldn't be is something in the future, unless it's positive. It shouldn't be something negative, because first of all, it doesn't help you. Second of all, it doesn't help anyone around you. And it definitely doesn't attract people to you, other than the people that are glad you're suffering and glad you're telling negative stories because it makes them feel better. That's a terrible thing to say and a terrible way to be, but we all know there are people like that. And it's not even their fault. That's just human nature. Comparison is the thief of joy, right? But if I can say you're worse off than me, then somehow I feel better. Not me for sure, but I understand why some people operate that way. So all you have to do is say to yourself, have I said this more than once? If you've said it more than once, it's now a story. And the challenge with that story is that every time you say it, you're just reinforcing it. So, and what's even more amazing is, for anybody who believes in the power of now, I talk about Eckhart Tolle and the power of now all the time. Everything happens in the now. Even the future happens in the now, because there's no such thing as the future. It's always the now, right? So tomorrow is nothing more than the now when tomorrow comes. It doesn't exist until it's actually happening. So the negative storytelling is just taking your energy and projecting things that aren't even real yet. And I call it pre-TSD. There's post-traumatic stress syndrome from something that actually happened, but so many people create because they're worrying about things that don't even exist, these fictional enemies, these stories that aren't even real. I've always told good stories to myself, so I'm a hypocrite. I'm saying don't storytell, but I definitely tell good ones. And the amazing thing is that almost everything has come true. I mean, from a young, teenager even, I just expected the best. And believe me, I was not popular in high school. I had a weird upbringing, a terrible mother, horrible stuff. So it wasn't like it was some natural default, but I was determined to say, hey, this is the good that's going to happen. My sisters always make fun of me because they said he doesn't want to get married. That's why he's made this impossible list for a wife. But guess what? Nadia, the woman of my dreams, the love of my life for 33 years, meets everything on that list. So you tell those good stories and it comes true. And what's amazing is that, people keep repeating this process, right? As my partner, Steve Shaw, my partner and what we're doing with this book always says, he says, thought is the moment of possibility. The action is the moment of truth. And the storytelling is the moment of escape. And that is not the circle you want to live in. That's what happens. Instead of somebody having a thought, here's a possibility. Oh, I'm going to do this to bring that to fruition. They go to the third one. Well, but he probably doesn't even want to do it with me. She probably doesn't even want to invest. I mean, it's such a hard business. And you start with all the reasons that whatever it is can't happen, or that person you want to date, or whatever it might be. And you get caught into this loop. And it kills me because if you're listening to this, you know how much I adore you. But there's this person in my life, that has a son that's going through a transition. And, this person is really focusing on how it's affecting them instead of just stopping and really saying, what does he need? Where is he at? This is not about me. And when you start telling stories about this person, he's not even the same person anymore. Or, I can't believe he doesn't care about, the family or whatever it might be. All storytelling. And it's doing damage to this person I care about, but it's also doing damage to the son because he's thinking, gosh, you just don't get it. And then that just digs in the damage deeper. Trying to control other people with this storytelling is one of the most damaging things. What we really need to all do is just say, what do I want to change in my life? Because most storytelling comes from this uneasiness between where you're at and where you want to be or who you want to be with, right? So if you want to get rid of this storytelling, replace it with clarity on what you want to change and then the actions you need to take. I mean, it sounds so basic and obvious, right? But yet it is mind-blowing how many people can't get out of the other loop. I have really close friends that, for literally decades have been sharing the same stories with my wife and I, and yet nothing changes, but the storytelling continues. So they're manifesting that. And that's why stopping the storytelling is so important, because when you stop telling stories, what happens is a few things. One, it rewires your brain, right? If you're not telling negative stories and you're expecting the best, and of course reacting well to the worst, you start to look for solutions instead of problems. You put on a different pair of glasses. You start to see the good in the world and in yourself. You become an optimist. Oh no, not an optimist. Jeffrey, you're such a naive guy. Real things happen in the world. And if we're negative about it, then we're not disappointed when it actually comes true. I hope none of you think that way, because I have heard that justification for not being an optimist. But again, an optimist just means, you can't achieve anything in this world if it doesn't start with a belief in a thing, if it doesn't start with believing that it can be achieved. So, becoming an optimist is a good thing. And what it also does, if you connect, I love Becoming Supernatural. It is by Joe Dispenza. It's one of my favorite books. It's in my list of rereads, if you will. It becomes kind of the Bible of my life. These guides, these references that I keep rereading the highlights and keep checking myself. And I always say this, I make mistakes constantly. Everything I preach and talk about, I violate at some point because we're human beings. But what I can say with pride is that I get better every day, every month, and every year. So even when I have a setback, I land at a higher place, right? So the second thing is, per Joe Dispenza, when you connect that feel to a feeling, when you connect that thought, that positive story, if you will, or that positive expectation to a feeling, that's what helps manifest it. So it's not just positive thinking. Oh, I know everything's going to be great. Okay, I'm off to my day. Everything sucked. What happened? It's, like in my morning meditations, I start by breathing, taking the energy through my body, feeling my body purge any gray air, if you will, any negativity, any weight, any anxiety. And then I start to literally picture the future, my family sitting around a pool in the south of France somewhere, the kids with their kids. I'm teaching them how to cook. My wife and I are dancing around and having fun. I see it so clearly to the point where I start to feel it so deeply. I've even, cried in my meditations. Please don't judge me. But it's true. Like when you really connect that thinking to a feeling, the universe, your body, the world doesn't know that it doesn't exist, right? Just like when you think about something, happy, you smile, right? You feel your body fill up with joy. It didn't actually even happen yet, but you're just connecting that feeling to the excitement of it. So you can trick the universe, if you will. Actually, instead of tricking it, I should say become in line with it, which is the third thing you get. I'm telling you this from experience. When you start only thinking about positive things, telling positive stories, dropping the negative script that you've written for yourself, it attracts the right people into your circle, into your life. I mean, it's like, for anybody who remembers what a radio is, I mean, think about like radio frequencies, right? You connect with the frequency that you are most aligned with. I just know it and I believe it. As a realtor, I always have great clients. I love my clients. They're happy to pay me a fair fee. Other realtors tell horror stories of clients are so bad and this business is so hard and I can't get paid. Why is it that one of us is having a very different experience than the other one? It's the energy you choose to connect with. You will attract the right people into your life, personally and professionally, when you have those kind of positive thoughts and expectations. And you just free up so much time. I mean, the storytelling is exhausting. And it really is just you potentially not wanting to face what's really troubling you, right? So the first step is to catch yourself doing it. Or I think it's a great idea. Ask someone that, you're comfortable with or multiple people to remind you when you're doing it, when you're starting to tell negative stories and repeating the same stories. Believe me, some of your friends will be thrilled that you ask them to tell you because they don't want to hear it again. And what it does, as you probably have experienced if you're that person, is it starts to really become your identity. And that's what happens with, therapy and people that are going backwards to find the answers, is it really just becomes your identity. And as crazy as it is, as Eckhart Tolle says, people get very comfortable with their negative story and their, I hate to say it, but their victim identity because it's just what they know. But it takes courage to stop that. And if therapy's working for you, I'm not saying stop it. What do I know? But all I'm saying is if you haven't, you just have to ask yourself, since I started therapy or whatever it is, how much better has my life gotten? What has actually changed? What stories am I no longer telling? And if that's happening, then great, keep it up. But otherwise, save yourself some money and even more time by, instead of going backwards to find solutions, say, this is my life. My life starts today. What can I do starting today that will be the opposite of the negative storytelling and that will get me closer to where I want to be and how I want to live? And another thing is, just like this person in my life with their son, just keep asking yourself, what else could it be? Look to justify the other person's case, if you will. What are all the good reasons or the opposite of the negative things you're thinking be for this person's behavior of what's going on, right? Like the simplest example is, he's not calling me back. Okay, maybe he's really busy working. Maybe he doesn't feel good. Maybe he's in the middle of something else. Maybe he lost his phone. Maybe he just needs some space so that he can give you what you deserve. That's a way better way to look at it than, oh, they must be mad at me. They must not care anymore. They don't get it. I mean, think about it. We always start telling these stories. And the other thing you can do is just, it's amazing how many people have told me a story like that. And then I say, well, did you ask that person? And you'd be amazed how many people say, well, no. So the first thing to do is just get the answer, right? Even with real estate negotiations, realtors will tell me all the time, oh, my client, this, that, and the other thing. And I said, well, have you just asked them? And they're like, well, not yet, or no, or, I don't know. It's awkward, or it's going to make them uncomfortable. I always say, turn the concern into a question. I wonder if they're having, doubts or second thoughts on pursuing the purchase of this home. What do they need from me? Not what do I need from them? And then just ask, hey, it seems like there's a change in your sense of urgency and your behavior. Have you decided maybe this isn't the right home or the right time? What can I do to help? That's very different than wondering what they may be thinking, and then even worse, taking actions based on what you think they might be thinking. Now you're trying to solve a problem that doesn't even exist, which gets things even more complicated. So that's it. This is a short one, but I had been really thinking about that lately, and I hope you can only tell good stories slowly. Remember, it's all about Kaizen. Just try to get a little bit better every day, every week. We're not here to change the world overnight. No big promises, just a little bit better, a little more peace, a little more joy each day. Have a beautiful holiday season. Thank you so much for listening.